Welcome to Peaky podcast. Today we have a Gali Hartuv, CEO and co-founder of Warrior Lab, Africa's GOAT of VIP strategy, featured on iGaming Africa and winner of Next.io Gaming Idol. Over 13 years, he has built winning VIP programs across 4 continents. And today we will talk about Africa, about defining African VIPs, attraction tactics, retention, cultural challenges, and benchmarks, and some practical case studies we also will share with you. So stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, give us a like, put a comment down below if you have any questions which we don't cover here today. Let's get started. Gali, welcome back. So pleasure to see you here again. The first question is going to be about defining VIP player in Africa. Who is it up to your experience?
So firstly, good morning, Vasilii. Thank you so much again for having me here. I'm very excited for the conversation. So first things first, when we define VIP, I like to utilize a universal definition firstly, but I'll get to Africa in just a second. The definition, and my personal definition when it comes to VIP, is quite simply any individual player who can deposit above your average deposit thresholds, afford to lose and not have that loss impact their playing or deposit behavior. And in addition to that, that they continue to deposit consistently. So that, in theory, is the definition of a universal VIP. Now, when we talk about VIPs in Africa, it's important not to think of them purely as just high rollers. A VIP in this region isn't just about who can wager the most money. They are players who are deeply engaged, they're culturally connected, and consistent over long term. So if I look at, say, Warrior Lab and what we do when we look at VIPs in Africa, through the various lenses available, what we're trying to determine is, what share of wallet and lifetime value do the VIP cohort contribute? So for example, a player who deposits, say, $2,000 per month in Nigeria might be just as valuable relative to local economy as someone that is doing $20,000 in, say, a European tier 1. So what defines them as VIP is not the absolute stake, but in addition to that, their loyalty, the sustainability factor, consistency, retention potential, and as well, especially in Africa, that tendency to advocate for the brand within their own local networks. That for me is what would define a VIP player in Africa.
Nice, thank you for sharing. Am I right that African VIPs, they differ from European ones? As you mentioned, 2,000 in Nigeria in comparison to 20,000 in Europe. Is it like that for the whole African market or just for Nigeria?
No, it would be throughout Africa. I mean, we've got 54 countries, I think, in Africa. Every country is completely different. And so you'll find that there are these very specific nuances in every country that would differ to Europe.
Exactly. In 2,000 amount, it's quite a huge, I would say, up to my personal experience. As far as I know, during attracting players, I see average deposits from 30 cents, 50 cents, $1, $2. It's kind of average deposit. And I've been talking with many affiliate programs and with many providers on the market, and they consider VIP player for $100. It's already VIP there, because average revenue is something like 150, like in Kenya, for example, or in Benin, or in French-speaking Africa. So 2,000, it's quite a solid VIP player, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it was just an example. So yes, it would be incredibly high for, say, the Nigerian market. I would say for the majority of African business, if you look at it through, say, a European lens, it would be perceived more as microtransactions and micro betting compared to standardized and general norms that you'd get across Europe. So, Africa, everyone has always said, is about volume as opposed to value. But the reality is that there is that really small segment that contributes a huge amount towards the African region.
Yes, sure. I agree with that point. What share of market revenue does VIP players bring?
So Africa as a geo, there isn't too much content-wide consolidated data at the moment, but the numbers that we've seen from top operators are quite significant. So, for instance, if you look in South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, VIP segments can contribute anywhere between 30 to 50% of total gaming revenue. In fact, in some cases, VIP accounts for over 50% of monthly deposits in certain operators. So even though they make up this like tiny percentage of the active player base, it's something that we see that in this instance does mirror global trends where the small but loyal group of high value players do drive a disproportionate amount of contribution towards that bottom line. So you're looking throughout Africa by general observation and average, roughly 30 to 50% of total gaming revenue is VIP.
Nice, very interesting fact. And what about average age or demographics for VIP players in Africa? Does it differ somehow from Europe, or generally speaking, it's the same?
I think
Like middle-aged persons?
there are some overlaps, although Africa being one of the youngest demographics globally, the typical VIP profile in Africa is generally around, I'd say, 30 to 45 years old, male, which makes up roughly, I'd say, 70 odd % of the VIP segment falls within that kind of categorization. However, there is quite an exciting trend that we're seeing now happening throughout Africa, particularly in markets like Nigeria and Kenya, where female VIPs are becoming increasingly prominent. So today, I would say up to 25% of new VIP entrants in some of these countries are now women, many of whom are actively playing on football, as well as in emerging verticals like esports. We see crash games having overtaken sport in certain geos as a bigger product, where in some geos, I would say crash games is now something like 40%. So these players, what we're finding in Africa, because they're young and they're very connected, they're usually very tech savvy. They're financially independent. They're highly engaged on mobile platforms. So, I think in Africa, it's critical where we're mobile first as like a default. So, yeah, I think that's what we're seeing as far as demographic. Mobile first, predominantly male, 30 to 45 is what we're seeing. And the new emergence is female VIPs on the rise, betting football, esports, and crash games.
Very interesting about women in iGaming. It's growing. By the way, it's not growing only in Africa, it's also growing in Latin America, for example. So keep that one in mind. They started playing more and more active, this segment of our audience. And if we talk about crash games, you mentioned crash games several times, and you mentioned it's even more popular than sport in several geos. Could you make a comment about those geos? Where is it? And the second question, as far as I know, retention, for example, on crash games, it's not very high if we talk about tier 1 or tier 2 countries. Yeah, like classic slot machines or live casino is more popular. Is it like that in Africa, or everybody in crash games and retention is huge and VIP players also play crash games?
I think you described it perfectly. That what we're seeing is, and I'll use South Africa as like a very good case study because we've done a lot of work in South Africa recently, where we find that the crash game segment of VIP, they come in, they initially lose potentially quite a lot quite quickly. which obviously gets them on your radar sometimes within the first week of registering. So the detection factor, if you have it set up, is incredibly quick to find these players that are showing high indicators of value. Now, the lifespan of a crash game VIP can be incredibly short-lived. We're talking maximum 6 months. But for most cases, what we find is that the general retention rate of a crash game VIP is somewhere more realistically around 3-4 months. So it's not a lot compared to, say, your live casino or even your sports customers. We're seeing on live casino, players are sticking around for up to a year and more. For sports, people are incredibly loyal, provided that there's variation in how you are promoting your product. And hybrid players are obviously like the bread and butter that we're aiming for, because there's variation in how they play. Often the cross-selling and upselling opportunities are more significant. And even if they're winning on one product, often what you'll find is they'll redeposit or reinvest those winnings into the secondary product, which often plays back some of those winnings to the operator. So when it comes to crash games, though, compared to all the other verticals, it's probably the shortest life cycle of other VIPs.
Exactly, I can confirm that. Nevertheless, I know a lot of traffic going to crash games nowadays. So if you would like to see a new episode on this channel about crash games, how to retain users in these games on your brand, let us know in the comments below. We will definitely make a podcast about it next time. Coming back to VIPs in Africa, how to attract those VIP players? Are there any secret techniques, offline maybe even somehow involved in it? If so, what are your best practices to attract VIP players?
So Africa is incredibly unique, I would say, when it comes to attracting VIPs. It's not like your Macaus or your Vegas and all of that, where there are these massive pools of VIPs waiting for someone to come with the best offer. To attract VIPs in Africa, I think operators really need to anchor their strategy around local passion points as well as cultural relevance. It's something that I swore I wouldn't focus on too much, which is this overemphasizing that we see, especially on like LinkedIn, where everyone goes, "Oh, localize." The reality is that there are huge local passion points and cultural relevance points throughout Africa. I think football is probably the biggest hook. And we've seen this in Africa, hosting events such as like La Liga, partnering with several, I would say, operators and companies and brands throughout Africa, English Premier League, match viewings and having hosting parties. Not everyone has, international television where they can watch the broadcasts of Premier League games. So hosting parties has become like a really prominent way to recruit. And when you look at that tied to like VIP, you're looking at like invitationals, private events with food and, ways to showcase your brand's connection to the realities out there that people want to bet on. But beyond events, I'd say experiential marketing works incredibly well. So if I look at, say, Kenya, and I'll give you a good example, Safaricom, which is quite a prominent website, they partnered with operators to run local tournaments, and that doubled registrations when paired with, say, mobile money incentives. So that's one example. Another area when it comes to attracting VIPs would be speed. The efficiency of your website or of your app plays a pivotal component when VIPs are browsing your website or browsing your option to migrate or consolidate business to. So African VIPs value instant access. It's something that goes not just beyond accessing the website, but operators as well when it comes to things like KYC. If your KYC approvals can be completed in, I think the SLA benchmark for VIP is something like 10 minutes. If you can complete your KYC in under 10 minutes, like you've got their attention. If you can process withdrawals quickly, you basically hit the lottery, because VIPs want their money now. They want to be able to play when they want to play. They don't want to go through the tedious process of verification and document submission and all of that, and then still wait for you to give them their approval 24 hours later. Like 10 minutes is the attention span. So I would say instant access and speed is the next component to attract VIPs.
Exactly, totally agree. By the way, you mentioned already several things we discussed with you about half a year ago. For those who are new on our channel, look in the videos for the video with Gali Hartuv about VIP players, how to attract and retain them on the product. We will attach a link in the description below. Don't forget to check it. There are much more insights, and it's all about the whole world. And today we are concentrated on Africa. So coming back to Africa, and if we talk about attracting VIP players, all those things are really crucial, like mobile speed, fast KYC, fast withdrawals and top-ups. Can't disagree with it. But also it's important to work on what value you provide to VIP players, what VIP programs you have on board. Here I would like to mention one example about one win VIP strategy. It's a great example. And if we talk for affiliates, about affiliates, how to attract, they can even use those tools. They can even use special landing pages, special channels, special creatives, which are combined to attract exactly VIP players. That's very interesting because I didn't meet it like on a wide range. Usually it's on product, but not on VIP materials. And if we talk about this VIP program, this VIP platform, there are for sure all those basic privileges like concierge service, high bonuses, cashback, priority support, and so on. But also, for example, they share exact digits. Like they pay $15 million on a monthly basis to VIP players in Africa. Imagine that. So if you do something like that, try to make a step forward, like be 1 or 2 steps forward in front of the whole industry, because you need to have every time something special there on the table. So coming back to communication channels, if we talk about best communication, for sure we already mentioned mobile phones in Africa, like the main gadget, I would say, for internet access. That means it's somehow connected to messengers, SMS, and so on, I guess. What is your opinion? What is your experience about it? What are the best channels in Africa for you?
So, I mean, you already touched on it and you're 100% correct. So the most effective channels, obviously, to speak to your players are the ones that they're already using daily. So WhatsApp and Telegram right now in Africa dominate. I think what we're seeing is something like 60% of successful VIP communication is driven through WhatsApp or Telegram, direct messaging to applications that they use on the daily. These channels as well, I mean, they're personal, they're trusted, they allow for that humanized engagement style. What we're seeing in Africa as well is SMS still accounts for roughly a quarter of communications, especially in regions where mobile data coverage is inconsistent. And what we're seeing in addition to that are push notifications as well, make up to roughly 15% of VIP engagements are push notifications. But when I say push notifications, I mean, these are highly personalized push notifications. They're targeted to sub-segments of segments. So the reason that it's done like that is to avoid them being ignored or disabled by the player, which you often get through, say, generic CRM push notifications or spam messages, etc. I think the lesson, especially when it comes to African attraction, it's not about mass marketing when it comes to these kind of communication channels. It's about using the right channels and connecting with your players where they are at the times that they are available. And this is something that's universal. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in North America. We've seen it in Latin America. VIPs want to contact you on the channels they want and they trust at the times that they're available. It's something that we've seen in Africa now which is slowly gaining in popularity, and that's the consolidation of communication channels into omni-channel solutions. So it is something that we're seeing lead into this consolidation of channels for operators to better manage in one place. It's also supporting, say, quality control on third-party platforms like WhatsApp and Telegram, so that operators still have visibility and oversight on what account managers are saying and doing with those VIPs outside of working hours, for instance. And then in addition to that, when it comes to communication, just in general, 24/7 support is obviously something that we're seeing, but we're seeing a big rise of chatbots for automation and instant service. But when it comes to VIP, the account management out of our service is being offered as an additional benefit or value add to existing service. So having that VIP premium service beyond, say, a 24/7 customer support or an AI chatbot is something that we're seeing become more prominent in Africa as well.
Very interesting. And when you mentioned segmentation and segmentation of the segmentation, do you talk about VIP in general also? And if so, how many segments are there? Like one, two, three, five, or you go deeper and deeper? And if so, what do you use for that? Just like mechanic work or any AI tools or whatever? How do you do this segmentation?
So there's so many different ways to approach segmentation and sub-segmenting your database. So I mean, when it comes to tools and automation, AI is rising in VIP. We've seen it in the last 2.5 to 3 years, a new segment in VIP forming, which is known as early detected VIPs. These are basically players that sit between general players and VIP, but they aren't potential VIPs. Early detected VIPs are found through behavioral attributes without value having presented itself yet. So that's a new segment in VIP that's now been around for the last 2.5 years or so. So now when you look at the ladder of general segmentation, you have non-VIP player, early detected VIP, potential VIP, VIP, and then like your whales. So those are like the 5 overarching categories of player. But when you look within an operator's environment, how that VIP program's been structured is completely down to the criteria that defines the VIP program. And that's generally embedded and built in that strategy. So you could have 3, I would say, tiers. If we want to take the most common and generic naming convention in VIP, you'd have your silver, gold, platinum, for example, which I don't advocate for at all. I'm not a fan of elemental names and calling VIPs bronze, for example. But for the most part, how many segments you want in your VIP program is subjective. It's down to the operator. It's down to how they want to structure things. And then when it comes down to sub-segments, it comes down to what you're trying to segment within those segments. Is it product? Is it demographic? Is it playing behavior? Is it spending capabilities? Is it day of the week that they're playing on? Like, there's so many infinite number of variables that could be utilized to sub-segment a segment. What is important, though, is that you don't try and categorize for the sake of it. Just because you have the data doesn't mean that you have to use that data. My advice is always, if you're going to sub-segment a segment, do it with intention and build it into a strategy or a process that it becomes actionable, not just an insight. So many times I see VIP programs have endless reports and dashboards and a million Excel documents, and they just sit there. They don't do anything. So often it's a case of wasted BI resource, or it's just additional reviews that don't lead to anything. So I would say if you're going to segment VIP or sub-segment your segments, do it with purpose and intention.
Exactly. Totally agree about those segmentation on a very high level. also intention is very like important here, but it is also about running campaigns like in media buying. It's quite similar, I would say, or making retargeting. If you
Yeah.
do deep on the segmentation, like this one player is gonna be a segment, that will not work, and you will lose those on a wide selection of players. So yeah, keep in mind you should be smart about it, and there is some point where you should stop with this segmentation and just think about new audiences, new bonuses, new benefits or values on your product. If we talk about standout campaigns in Africa for VIP players, do you have anything in mind, like your favorite campaign in Africa, what you can recommend or share here?
I'm not sure about recommendation, but I definitely have a favorite promotion that has stuck with me for a couple of years. I mean, when you think out of the box, especially in like coming from a VIP background, I've always advocated to think out the box and find, I would say, incentives or things that encourage your players to be loyal that goes beyond just free bonus or free spins and things like that. And the one promotion that really does stand out to me and it made an impact the moment I saw it was actually a promotion in, I think it was 2023, that was run by Betica, where they did a goat giveaway. The hashtag that Betica used for this goat giveaway was "Be the Goat," and I found that the handle was, obviously it was a play on words because everyone knows, greatest of all time, and it's trying to use that, but they were being literal as well. So "Be the Goat" was the campaign where every week during December, I think they gave away like 3 goats every week. And from an outsider perspective, it looks bizarre. However, if you understand why it was such a prominent promotion, especially in December time. Now, this goat giveaway was targeted to Ghana, where goats are obviously an important part of festival season or festive season during December. They're a primary source of meat for celebrations. They also serve as a valuable asset for households for incomes or savings to have livestock. So to give a goat away was like a genius idea that played on the festive season as well as investment that was not a bonus. And it turned out to be a really fantastic promotion. I mean, I don't have the promotional performance insights, but the fact that we're still talking about a goat giveaway in Ghana 2 years after the fact, I think is proof enough about the brand impact that this campaign had. And although I don't do much work in Ghana, it still is one of the most prominent promotions I've seen throughout Africa.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing. And let's go into retention and monetization of VIP players. What retention techniques are effective in Africa?
So going back there, so when we take all these elements of this hybrid approach, we're looking at how it's impacting VIP performance. So the example that I've got is the South African sportsbook that we've done work with, where they have this points for play system with a 24/7 dedicated VIP WhatsApp line. And the combination of these two value adds, a combination of reward for loyalty, reward for activity, as well as a dedicated point of contact and service, has seen VIP performance generate 30% higher monthly revenue per user compared to standard players within the non-VIP segment, which is all proportionate to their standard activity. In addition to that, we've seen retention numbers rise across the VIP segment as well, because it goes beyond just giving them rewards. They have the points, they can choose their bonuses, they can go access whatever they want. But the value add is the fact that I have an exclusive VIP contact line. And that's something that I get because I'm a VIP. And then beyond that as well, what we've done is in building on this identity and the sense of belonging by having that VIP recognition and that VIP status, we've launched things like seasonal tournaments and VIP only leaderboards. And these exclusive watch parties and events and things that are forming these digital communities, so to speak, where VIPs are interacting, and that's creating this stickiness within those player segments. So this is something that we have seen as well in other parts of Africa. So if I look at markets, again, say like Nigeria, where positioning VIPs as part of, say, this prestigious club, it resonates with strong cultural values around status and community. The goal there, it's not just about keeping them playing. It's about making your player feel part of something bigger than the product itself, ultimately the flagship of your website. And I think that's where we're seeing this monetization retention technique really become effective, is when the players buy in to more than what you're selling. They buy into the ideology of what you're selling.
Exactly. So separate line like for calls or for WhatsApp, whatever. Special bonuses like cashback, for example, unique cashback offers for VIP players, maybe special loyalty program connected to it. What else? Are there like same techniques as we use, for example, in Europe or in CIS regions, with a present for VIP players like electronic tickets or maybe some gadgets? Does it work there also?
It does. Gifting definitely has an important role to play in Africa. However, I've seen this go really badly, especially in regions where you'll have, say, an international operator that is operating in an African geo, and they just blanket gift, say, over Christmas, they send Christmas gifts to every VIP, and it's just alcohol. Now, there are big areas throughout Africa that have large Muslim communities. And although, yes, they're gambling, you're sending them a Christmas present that's alcohol. You've already disconnected with them twice in the same gift. So often what we find is that these gifting incentives are misaligned. They're quite generic. There's no real personalization effort into how to engage. I actually had a conversation with someone yesterday where they're busy building out their birthday gifting process. And the first thing they said to me is, okay, so on their birthday, should we offer them a gift or a bonus? And I'm like, well, at that point in time, it's too late to offer them a gift, because who wants to get a birthday gift 3 weeks after their birthday? That's a conversation that should have happened a month before their birthday. And if they don't want the gift, then give them a bonus or something on their birthday. But this is the unfortunate way that we are thinking, is that we look at it very surface level. Like if you're a VIP player and it's your birthday, you want to wake up and there's a box wrapped with a handwritten card and a nice ribbon, and you have no idea what it is, but my account manager sent it to me. That's the personal touch that VIPs want, not a call on their birthday going, happy birthday, he has 100 free spins, by the way, what can I buy you?
Exactly. So, do you have any advice for those VIP managers who struggle what to choose for a VIP player? For sure, don't buy Christmas presents for Muslims. That's obvious advice for sure. But maybe there are any other special tactics or tools how to figure out what to make as a present, to give as a present, as a gift to your VIP client. If you're a VIP manager, how to choose?
When it comes to gifting in VIP, and I've said this numerous times in my master classes, in my articles, the gift itself is not as important as the feeling that it makes. So the reality is you're buying something for someone who could probably buy whatever you get them for themselves. The reality behind it is, how do you make them feel in that moment? And I'll illustrate this with an example. Many years ago, when I was still hosting accounts, I was working for a prominent company in the UK, and I had a VIP player that was worth tens of millions of pounds. Now, this player, obviously endless wealth, could buy himself whatever he wanted. I'm thinking, now, what do I buy this guy? I had an amazing relationship with this player, this VIP. And I knew he didn't have kids, but he had a chocolate Labrador named Douglas. Now we're talking 10 years ago, and I can still recite the story like it was yesterday because of what happened afterwards, and I'll share that too. So over the time that I managed this player, I got pictures of Douglas. I knew all about him. We used to chat about our love for animals. And when it came down to giving him a gift, I spent £100 on his gift. I got him a stainless steel dog bowl. I engraved Douglas's name on the side, and I put an engraving of Douglas's face inside of the bowl. I sent it in a beautiful box. I had it wrapped. I had a card made, and I sent it to the player. £100 for a player worth 7 digits pounds. And everyone looked at me like I was insane. Like, this person has lost millions of pounds. You're sending him a £100 gift. I got a 2-page handwritten thank you letter from this player. And he said to me in this letter, in a nutshell, in all the years that I've gambled, no one's ever sent me such a thoughtful gift. And it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about what it is. It wasn't even a gift for him. It was a gift for his dog. And the reality is, here you have a player worth 7 figures, sending you a 2-page handwritten thank you note, where long after Douglas passes away, that gift is going to be the memory of his dog. And that's what you're gifting him. You're gifting him the story. You're gifting him the feeling. You're gifting him that relationship that you have taken such note of the information that he shared, that he now feels heard and seen. That player is loyal to you until the very end. And that's the value of gifting. It's not about buying expensive whiskey or whatever it is. It's about making them feel something that money can't buy.
Exactly. That's like quite obvious, to be honest. It's like a basic marketing rule. You should sell not an exact good. You should sell an emotion to people.
Correct.
And that is the same if we talk about VIPs and VIP managers, because I know some companies even calculates, okay, 7 digits pounds, okay, let's say 1% out of it, it's going to be the present. No, it's not an approach. The best approach is to sell emotion, feeling, and personal attitude.
Correct.
I can agree with it 100%. How to balance fraud detection and VIP clearance if we talk about VIPs and monetization?
Oof. Okay.
Yeah, straight back.
So, I mean, this is obviously one of the biggest pain points on the continent. And I mean, too often, I would say a legitimate VIP is treated as suspicious simply because their deposit or bet size doesn't fit the average local profile. And we see this in VIP quite a lot. The result here, though, is what we call a false positive, where these false positives land up frustrating high-value players, and it could potentially lead to immediate churn. So the solution here is within your fraud framework to also segment your fraud framework. So operators need to create what we would call VIP clearance funnels, where the fraud team is pre-notified or at least aware of VIP indicators of value that can support their efforts in VIP and fraud looking at the same profile, but instead of one flagging it and one going after it, we're looking at this as part of the same onboarding strategy. So this allows for us to fast track checks instead of taking this blanket auto block approach. Secondly, it's a case of fraud detection shifting away from purely transactional to behavioral profiling. And that's something that comes about by VIP and risk and fraud teams collaboratively working together. So for instance, a genuine VIP, and I'll put this in a scenario. A genuine VIP considers, say, consistently betting on English Premier League with high stakes, while fraudulent behavior usually shows, say, patterns like erratic bet sizing or constantly cashing out or attempts to cash out while they go ahead. And I think what's important here is, like, when we're teaching fraud teams to spot patterns rather than just amounts, the same for VIP, you can protect both the player and the business. But I think when it comes to that, it's also understanding what does that benchmark look like. So the benchmark in how to keep false fraud like rates or false positive rates low, for VIP, it needs to remain under 2%. Anything higher risks alienating that segment that is at the end of the day driving like 50% of your revenue. So you can't be flagging more than 2% of VIPs. And even with that flag, the VIP team and the risk team and fraud team should be working collaboratively anyway, communicating how do we approach this player? Do you understand who they are, what they've done? Can you give us the behavioral personal insights that the data isn't showing us? If a VIP sold their house and suddenly their bet size increases 10x, fraud won't see that they sold their house. The account manager knows this because we sent them a bottle of champagne or a congratulations letter or whatever because they sold their house. All fraud sees is that the bet size increased 10 times. So this is something that requires both ends of the funnel to speak together, or you're going to land up in a situation of a false positive, alienating the player, and they're just going to leave you.
Thank you for sharing about this 10 times higher betting turnover. If we talk about selling a house, hope they don't sell the last house they have. And it's time to talk about responsible gambling, responsible gaming for VIP players. What is it? And how to understand? Is it the last house? Is it like one house out of 10 they have? To be responsible, because responsible gaming, it's long-term gaming for all the industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I read something on LinkedIn yesterday that said something like 30% or even 40% of African bettors gamble to survive, which is a crazy statistic. And, while that statistic may not apply to a VIP audience, it's still a scary statistic when you think about responsible gaming in Africa. Now, I think it goes without saying that RG efforts can't be an afterthought, especially with VIPs as well, where the risk of overspending is incredibly high. I think operators often make the mistake of applying as well the same RG tools to VIPs as general player bases. And what I mean by that is, just because you have self-exclusion or deposit and spend limits and loss limits on your website as a default or as a self-service, VIPs sometimes need a proactive, personalized safeguard. Just having the tool available on your website isn't always enough. And I think the most effective approach here is layered, and I'll break it down for you into a few parts. First, when it comes to VIP, is establishing what we would call dynamic deposit and loss limits that are pegged not to arbitrary figures, but at a percentage of the player's income, or I'd say historical deposit patterns. So, for example, if you want to cap their spend, take 50% of their average monthly deposit and apply that as like a dynamic loss limit or dynamic deposit limit. I think the second area, which is probably one of the more important ones, are implementing what would be a real-time alert. So if a VIP suddenly, say, doubles their average deposit in a short period of time, the account manager assigned to that player should receive a trigger to go and check in and conduct a wellness check on that player. The differentiator here is human intervention framed as care, where, a quick WhatsApp message or a call from the VIP account manager phrased as concern rather than policing the account is what's going to turn what could feel restrictive into a gesture of trust. And in practice, VIPs often appreciate that the operator, in addition to the account manager, they're looking out for them. That's what's going to strengthen loyalty. So instead of me going, Vasilii, your account has made us concerned. We have limited your account by 70%. This is how much you can play. Before it even gets to that, it should be a case of me going, Vasilii, I noticed that your deposit today is far higher than your normal deposits. I'm just making sure this isn't a typo or that you didn't mistakenly deposit this amount in your account. Please let me know before you play so that if it is a mistake, I can automatically withdraw it for you, that you don't feel, enticed to use money that you shouldn't play with. That proactive intervention, the moment you deposit, is great, because after the fact, you're not going to go, oh, Vasilii, I saw you deposited a lot. Here's 50% of your losses back, because after the fact, it's hearsay. If I think of one operator, and in this case, a Kenyan operator, had a proactive wellness check built in for VIP, where what would happen is we would categorize VIPs based on monthly limits. So every VIP would have a performance indicator. When VIPs hit 80% of that performance indicator, what would happen is the VIP team would be alerted to that, because the last thing you want is 7 days into the month, your VIP hits 80%. Because now you're at risk of either the player going inactive to maintain that 20%, or they start to overperform and they exceed 100%. So they're at risk of burning out. So I think in that case, what happens is when you start to have those interventions, like in this example, rather than experiencing that backlash, what happened was in the operational metrics, you have something called a player satisfaction rating, as well as a net promoter score. These are indicators in service that tell you how happy the player is with your interaction and how willing they will be to refer players to you or promote your brand. And what we saw across the board was a 20% increase in satisfaction scoring and net promotion scores, because VIPs here felt that they were valued as people, not just as a wallet. And this is something that I don't believe we see a lot of in Africa. It's something that is significantly underdeveloped, but it carries a lot of long-term value in the sense that you're retaining your players longer, you're retaining them sustainably, and your brand reputation as well as VIP program reputation is what's going to lead to future organic growth in addition to just value growth.
Exactly. Every effort we discuss during this podcast is about organic growth, about good attitude to your VIP players. One thing you mentioned about 80% performance rate for VIP players and making alert after that to a VIP manager. What do you mean by performance rate here? Like 80% of the deposit, or what do you mean? How do you calculate it?
For me, I like to look at it more as GGR as opposed to deposit. I mean, deposits could be quite volatile. If you deposit, withdraw, I mean, you're going to skew the metrics. So I like to look at it more as a GGR, and take a period of time GGR score and use that as my indicator. You can't just look 30 days GGR or whatever. You need to have a more extensive period of behavioral attribution where you can determine a figure that is more realistic. In some cases, people would use a median to remove outliers. And in that case, if they hit 80% of, say, their monthly GGR median, that's something that will then be flagged as an indicator of intervention.
Very, very interesting. So, and this GGR you count on a monthly basis, and you see, for example, in a month it's going to be 10,000 USD or whatever, and per each day it's going to be something like 300 or 400 USD. So your calculation is if on the daily basis it exceeds 80%, so let's say 500 USD. So there is an alert. Does it work like that?
It would be more accumulative. I mean, you can take it down to the granular, but the thing is, again, there are always going to be outlier examples why players would say play beyond, say, a daily average threshold. I think daily is a bit too granular, in my opinion. I'd look at it more accumulatively. And then once that accumulative value has been met, that's when you start looking at proactive outreach. At the end of the day, there's a lot of different factors that go into these type of strategies. It's not so, I would say, simple. There's a big framework that supports the mechanic. So I think for any operator that's considering, say, implementing the strategy, it's important to understand the different connecting pieces that go to just having an alert.
Yes, sure thing. Very interesting advice. Let's go into challenges and the localization questions in Africa. What cultural nuances are there on the table, and what should we keep in mind to work with Africans VIPs?
So this is something that we get asked quite a lot at Warrior Lab because, many of the operators who we work with in Africa, most of them don't have VIP programs. A big, I would say probably one of the most significant barriers actually to growing VIP or the VIP segment in Africa is a lack of expertise and awareness. I think many operators still treat VIP as simply bigger bonuses or higher deposit limits or withdrawal limits rather than a discipline that requires clear strategy, resources, KPIs, and structure. In many cases, VIP management in Africa is bundled into customer support or CRM, which means that players don't receive that personalized attention and that proactive engagement that we've been discussing up to now. So we see very different results in markets where VIP is recognized more as a revenue driver than a nice to have. And I think that the operators and teams that have invested in training account managers on relationship management, behavioral analysis, or achieving or how to achieve higher retention, those are the operators that are achieving greater lifetime value and retention rates. So I think until that shift happens more broadly, the VIP opportunity in Africa still remains underdeveloped, but I also see it as the biggest opportunity in Africa for those that decide to approach Africa with a VIP-centric approach or a VIP-led or VIP-first brand. And I think that those that are able to capture that side of the African market will be the ones who really succeed and grow exponentially because we don't have things like that in Africa, not at a broad level anyway.
And if we talk about African market in general, it's quite new if we talk about iGaming. I would say if we talk about the world in general. And from my experience, there are a lot of countries without regulation, with weaker regulation or with gray regulation, I would even say. For example, in Kenya recently, a new regulation was announced. They changed those departments like from BCLB to a new one. So everything is changing. So what are those regulatory and infrastructure obstacles on the market?
I think regulation and infrastructure are the two biggest hurdles as well for VIP in Africa. I mean, when you look at markets such as, say, South Africa, which has a relatively mature framework compared to most of other Africa, I mean, that gives operators confidence to invest in things like structured VIP. Others like Nigeria that sit in a more fragmented space where policies are potentially a bit unclear and enforcement can be inconsistent. I think that uncertainty makes operators hesitant to commit to like long-term initiatives and projects like VIP strategy. I think on the infrastructure side, in Africa, mobile money is both the biggest advantage and the biggest challenge. So systems like, say, M-Pesa in Kenya or MTN Momo in Ghana, I think those sort of options have really revolutionized financial access, but they also often come with transaction caps, slow withdrawal processing, and that friction it's a deal breaker for VIP. So, we mentioned it in the first question about speed and reliability. So I think many high value players right now are still much like in other markets. They're migrating that business offshore to brands simply because they can move money more easily or they can utilize, say, cryptocurrency as an alternative. I think in addition to that, when we're looking at regulatory obstacles, KYC is another bottleneck. So in countries with, say, weak or fragmented national ID systems, as a good example, verifying a legitimate player or VIP can take a lot of time, and that delay loses the player altogether in a segment where, again, speed is everything. So contrast this with, say, South Africa, where ID and banking structures are incredibly strong. It allows for quick onboarding, smooth, high-value transactions. So I mean, these are just contrasts based on local dynamics. I think if operators work with local payment providers and they can create these like VIP tiered solutions, I think that could push out clearer regulatory framework as well. Most of Africa, in fact, I can't think of a single region in Africa that has a VIP specific regulatory framework, South Africa included. And that's just one additional area that opens up that gray portion that you highlighted. So I think the brands that solve those pain points will not only retain African VIPs, but I think it will also set that benchmark for other markets throughout Africa, not just their local region. I think if anyone that can get those areas right would lay the benchmark for the rest of Africa.
And if we talk about limits for payments, as you mentioned, if we talk about mobile payments, there are some limits or caps. If we talk about depositing or withdrawals of the money, do you think that crypto is going to be an option? Is it popular in Africa in general? Do VIP players in Africa use crypto? Because what I see in other markets, like a very, very small percentage, I would say 2, 3, or 5% of VIP players are ready to use crypto. What is the situation in Africa?
I think long term, it's still a small percentage utilizing crypto right now, but it is growing. But if we look at, say, mature international markets, and I'll use the UK as a very good example, regulation has reached the point that it has driven VIPs offshore, where to operate a regulated VIP program is so difficult that most of those VIPs don't want to go through source of wealth. They don't want to go through rigorous, quarterly KYC and submit banking documents and etc. So they go and they play offshore. And in many of those companies, crypto is an available option. We've seen in territories like South Africa where there are preparations that have been made for crypto adoption, sorry, my dog. We have seen in areas like South Africa where crypto adoption is being, I would say, like prepared for. So in South Africa, we've just deployed the travel rule that any amount, I think it exceeds $200, is something that needs to be declared or accounted for. So we are seeing regulatory frameworks build up to the adoption phase. And I think it's something that is going to happen throughout Africa. It's just a matter of time. And as that adoption happens, seeing as we're mobile first, young demographic, cryptocurrency, in my opinion, is inevitable. So it is already in Africa. It may not be the majority, but it's definitely here.
Hope you will get it finally on the market. It's going to be regulated and widespread. Before I let you go for a walk with your dog, I have 2 final questions. First one about benchmarks for VIPs. What to track if we talk about VIP retention, if we talk about working with VIP players?
So I think when it comes to benchmarks, operators need to move beyond headline revenue, and they need to watch for like a handful of signals that predict program health. So, the starting point in most companies nowadays is just ARPU, the average revenue per user. A healthy VIP segment, what we're seeing is in most cases delivers a minimum of 2 to 3 times the ARPU of a general player. So that's obviously subject to player demographics. If the ratio is lower, for instance, you're either going to have an inflated VIP cohort or you're not offering differentiated value. Other areas to consider, would be, say, deposit frequency and recency, which is very similar to what we would see in marketing. So for most VIPs, you're looking at 6 to 8 or more deposits per month. Is deposit frequency is a standardized rate. Obviously, this varies by geo. From recency, we're obviously looking at deposits within 7 days. Any sort of drop in recency, especially after losses, is often like the earliest warning sign, I'd say, of churn. So service levels are measured as well when we're looking at other benchmarks, non-financial. So we're looking at, say, response times for VIP, generally less than 2 hours. We're looking at first contact resolution within 24 hours, assuming it's not a complex situation, or it's something that doesn't rely out of VIP department support. I highlighted it in fraud as well to keep that flag rate under 2% for the false positives. KYC, time to clear, in ideally less than 10 minutes, but I suppose your median clearance is roughly 30 minutes. Churn rates in VIP, you're looking at trying to keep your monthly VIP churn rates under 10% if you can. And then you need to obviously have 2 different scores. And the first one I look at, which is something that we've built in Warrior Lab, is what we call a health score, which determines performance. And the other one is obviously your friction index, which is if your health score, which blends your ARPU ratio, deposit frequency, compliance, net promoter score, etc. There's numerous different areas. And the friction index, which is when your, I would say, escalation counts, KYC retries, payment delays, policy exceptions, etc. If that health score drops, that's something that is going to cause problems. So that's where you have to have, recovery efforts, bonuses, retention, kick in, that proactive outreach. So those are just some indicators. It's a lot to take in, and there's obviously so much more that I could unpack on that, but I think that's a good enough insight.
Sure thing. If you would like to know more about benchmarks, don't hesitate to contact Gali directly. We will leave his contacts below in the description for his LinkedIn, for his amazing Warrior Lab project. So you can ask for a consultation, ask any question, I guess. Don't you mind if I say so? So yeah. Don't hesitate to leave your questions in the comments below. Also, we'll answer all of them. And you mentioned one interesting thing about churn rate for VIP players, to keep it not more than 10%. And as far as I know, up to last researches, players, and especially VIP players, they play on different platforms, and this digit is growing. For example, about 5 or 10 years ago, it was 2.1 platforms which are used by a player in average, and right now it's 3.4 or something. So it's growing, and players jumping from one platform to another, even during the month, like from one casino to another casino. If we talk about offline, during this bar trip, I would say. So 10%. Is it possible? Do you see this on all the projects you work with, or what are average digits? I'm trying to figure out, like 10% for real, or it's like 30 or 40% churn rate?
In more problematic programs, we've seen higher. I think one of the worst that we've seen was, I would say, more than 30%, which is crazy to think that every month 30% of your VIP program is cycling. We've also seen in some cases as high as 70%, but the 70% came down to poor segmentation planning and no structured VIP program onboarding, offboarding. So they were just taking, say, the top 500 best performing players by deposit or GGR every month. And this month, this is VIP. The next month, it's the next 500, next 500. And there's no retention cycle in that approach. So, what we're seeing now, at least in the programs that we've been working with long term, every one of them is under 10%. What we do find out is that the average VIP is playing between 4 to 5 accounts simultaneously. And that tends to be an average. What we do find, though, is that aside from the 4 to 5 accounts that they're playing at simultaneously, they almost always consolidate to their top 3. So ideally, you don't have to be number 1, but you definitely have to be top 3. If you're not top 3, that player's gone. So if you're in top 3, you will keep your retention rates under 10%. It is growing. We are seeing it, especially in the newer projects that we're taking on with Warrior Lab, that some of the projects we inherit have, I would say, significant retention issues, and it's down to a whole amalgamation of contributing factors, but all of which impact retention.
Fair enough. Thank you for such a detailed guide, detailed discussion today. One final question about predictions or trends, what you see on the African market, especially if we talk about VIP part. Do you see that anything gonna change here in general or not? And will it be maybe 2-3 years later something similar to the European Union? I mean, players and behavior, or will it differ? And will it be unique African market with African needs, with African behavior and stuff like that? What do you think?
I believe that the African component is never going to change. I think that without a doubt, more international operators are going to look to Africa as the next emerging market. It's already happening. So my prediction is that we're going to see a lot more investment from international operators trying to enter the African market. I do want to stress, and I saw this in a Telegram community group that I was a part of, Africa is a very, very unique continent. We're 54 countries with over 1,500 languages. We have like 3,000 plus different ethnic groups, customs, and traditions. And people go, we want to enter Africa, or we're looking for African traffic. This is an ambiguous statement. You need to be targeted. You need to understand what about Africa you're looking to penetrate as a new geo, the local cultural language, custom nuances. So I still believe we're going to see a lot of international attempts to enter Africa. I think we're going to see equally the same number of attempts. A lot of them fail. But I believe Africa to be the next hotspot now that Brazil has got its regulation and everything in LATAM has been securely defined or is in the process of. Africa is going to be the next turning point. I believe VIP will be a big focus, especially in the next 2 years, as the markets become more saturated, more competitive. Holding on to the value generating segment is going to be very important because, like we've seen in most of Africa, we have duopolies or monopolies that have already formed. So going mass market is not really an option based on budget. So you need to be more boutique and more niche. But as far as identity and Africa, that's never going to change. What will need to change is the perception and the approach from companies trying to enter Africa and how you plan to do that, whether you're going to be VIP-centric, non-VIP-centric, and how you're going to capture local audiences if you yourself are coming from the outside.
Exactly. I still believe there is enough space for new companies on the African market, and I talk not only about operators, but about affiliates, media, and any kind of the company. There are still hidden gold bars, diamonds, whatever you have in mind as a synonym of growing African market. It's still there on the table. Gali, thank you for such a productive discussion. Thank you for your insights. Always a pleasure to have you on air. And for sure, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, give us a comment about your best VIP strategy in Africa. Stay tuned. We're going to make an article on our blog, so visit our website about it. And don't forget to check our Africa Research podcasts. We have many of them on our channel. And share your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.